Welcome to the Parent Matters podcast, where we equip moms, dads, and caregivers to connect and confidently parent their children. Parenting doesn't come with a how-to manual, so we're here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of parenting. I'm your host, Susan Stutzman, a licensed clinical professional counselor, child therapist, early childhood development educator, and owner of Kid Matters Counseling. Today, we are going to talk about co-parenting through divorce. This is the second part in our two-part series on divorce. And to help me do that is child therapist Carly Schrimple. Carly's a licensed clinical social worker and child therapist at Kid Matters Counseling and has a lot of experience helping families and kids specifically navigate family separations and divorce. Welcome back to the show, Carly.
Thanks, Susan, for having me again.
We're going to talk about co-parenting through divorce, and I know you've written on this and you work with families day in and day out. You've worked with hundreds of families through this process. But first, can you tell us a little bit about what excites you when working with families in the co-parenting process?
What excites me about working with co-parenting is watching how something like divorce, which can be labeled as a trauma, can have a lot of healing and growth within the family system.
Yeah, it is. It's so beautiful to watch that unfold as parents lay down some of their frustrations and work together for the child. That's awesome. Okay, so let's jump into co-parenting through divorce. I know you brought three simple things to kind of just have parents think about as they are beginning this journey or continuing this journey of co-parenting. Can you share those with us? And then we'll delve into them a little bit deeper.
Absolutely. So the first tip on co-parenting through divorce is remaining neutral.
Okay.
The second tip is creating a consistent schedule. And the third tip is to use supportive language for the other parent.
Okay. Well, those aren't too simple, but they are three indeed. Let's start with the first one. So tell us a little bit about your suggestions, how you help parents or encourage parents to remain neutral through the co-parenting process.
Yes, so that is very important for children because when there is a loss or separation that occurred within the parent system, the parent relationship, there can be a lot of blame, or there could be a lot of siding going on with a particular parent. And so remaining neutral really helps the child not have to choose on which parent loves me more, or choose which parent do I go to for this, or choose between which parent can I go to for love.
Yeah. Okay, so, but help me understand this, because neutrality to me might mean something different to you or to our listeners. And as a parent, I know that it's hard sometimes to show neutrality, and I think that and not in loving my kids or showing different things, but there are big feelings that I have too, that around different events or things that are happening. So, are you saying don't show your kids any emotion? Just show them like everything's okay. Like, I don't think that's what you're saying. Tell me a little bit about what it looks like played out to be neutral.
Yeah. So when I use the word neutral, I am thinking more of emotionally charged language for the other parent.
Okay.
So an example of that would be, well, your father's never on time. That could be a comment that is made at pickup or drop off between homes.
Okay.
So, and that's definitely not neutral.
No, but something like, oh, that happens.
Yep. Oh,
Or sometimes we're late.
yep, exactly. So it's not putting down the other parent.
Okay.
To remain neutral, that's kind of a tip. Not putting
That's helpful.
down the other
Yeah.
parent, even if there is a hiccup, even if there is a
Mhm.
mistake, it's okay. So say, for instance, even in that situation, if a child is waiting for the other
Mhm.
parent, you can say, oh, I noticed they know that the parent is late. If they say like, oh, if they're waiting there, if they're having behaviors as the other parent, you can say, yeah, sometimes parents are late. Or, man, that really stinks. There was a mistake that was made. Dad thought that it was this time, or mom thought that it was this time.
Mhm.
We'll wait, or the plan has changed and mom or dad will come.
Okay.
So that's more neutral language as opposed to, yes, see, your dad's always late. He doesn't care about you. Or
Mm.
mom's always late. She's not putting you first. That wouldn't be neutral language in that situation.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's really helpful, and it's helpful to define what neutrality means because, it's not. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not that you don't have feelings
Mhm.
or a reaction to something, but it's more about you versus the other parent. So
Yes.
or if it's not just a blanket statement, like sometimes sometimes we run late, or sometimes people run late because something happened. So
Mhm.
I know your dad's going to be here. I know your mom's going to be here. Or if you know that they're coming, or you can say, oh, I'm feeling a little frustrated because even though sometimes things are different than what we planned, it can still be hard, and
Mhm.
take a deep breath, and you're talking about yourself, even though sometimes things are different, right? I feel frustrated, not your dad is such a blah blah blah, or your mom is
Yeah. And if
purposely doing that.
right, and if it does happen, because every parent makes mistakes, you
Mhm.
can repair that and say, ooh, I made a mistake. I didn't speak so nicely about mom. I didn't speak
Mhm.
so nicely about dad.
Yeah, that's important because, again, right, we aren't going to always get it right
Mm-hmm.
in any parenting.
Yeah.
In any type of parenting, we're not going to always get it right, but there's always the ability to repair or to come back around and say, you know what, I didn't get that right. And what a beautiful lesson to teach children that you can make a mistake and you can recover and you can come back and you can restart, or, as you said, repair in that. Okay, so that's number one, remain neutral. The second you shared is create a consistent schedule.
Yes.
At first glance, that sounds great, but with so much that goes into a household and with such transientness in our society, many parents don't have consistent schedules. So tell us a little bit about how you envision that and how a parent could do that regardless of their vocation.
Yep, absolutely. So, creating a consistent schedule stems from the need of children that they do need predictability and consistency so that they don't go into fight, flight, or freeze all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And one way to do that is to talk to the other parent and say what can work consistently. So, even if parents have different schedules or you don't know the schedule, having a similar way at each household on this is the schedule for my house and this is the schedule when you go to mom's house. So having it on the calendar.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So what you're saying is when you're at mom's, the schedule's consistent. Even if you don't have every Monday, Tuesday with mom and every Wednesday, Thursday with the other parent, right? Like but that there's a consistency
on how the schedule is delivered.
How the schedule is delivered. Okay.
Yeah. So that would be one tip. Another tip for inconsistent schedules with days or not the consistency, you can have bedtime being the same time at both households. So that way children know when they're going to bed and they feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that you can do as well to be consistent is if one parent says, oh, we have only 1 hour of screen time, that still applies to the other home. So those consistencies can be really helpful, along with transition consistency. So doing a specific ritual for pickup and goodbyes between each parent can be really helpful.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
okay, is that not that some co-parenting relationships are at a point where if you guys can decide on things like screen time, an hour at each home, but
Mhm.
sometimes or bedtime rituals or bedtime timing, right?
Mhm.
But there are some co-parenting relationships where they're not at that point.
Mhm.
So regardless of if you and your co-parent have the same rules in each house, you as one part of the co-parent want to have consistency at least at your house.
Correct.
And so the way that you're parenting provides a platform for your child, for them to feel safe,
Mhm.
to be predictable. And yet we know things might change.
Right.
And so talking about those changes and allowing the child to realize that, this is something that's a little bit different, especially with holidays or with vacations or with any type of transition, right, in the schedule. But letting the child know these are things that do remain the same. Even sometimes, eating. Right? Like, like I will always have your favorite snack, or I will try to always have your favorite snack, or, we'll always have breakfast, lunch, and dinner at my house, or, or bedtime or what have you.
Yeah.
But you're saying the consistency, regardless, it's great if parents can do it together.
Right.
Through co-parenting, like have the same things at the different houses.
Yeah.
But you're saying at least you, like whoever's listening to this, that one side of the co-parent having something, whether it be a few things or even just one thing that's consistent, so the child has a kind of like a platform or a safety in knowing this is going to happen at mom's. This is consistent here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you said that, because co-parenting is also a process, and it changes throughout the ongoing loss of the parents. And so sometimes parents don't agree on things like bedtime or screen time or what movie someone can watch. And so I'm really grateful that you picked up on, well, it can be consistent at one house versus the other house, but whatever it is, that parent remains consistent to that plan or that schedule. So that really helps.
Yeah.
In situations where parents don't agree on everything.
Yeah. Well, and even committed couples or committed co-parents that aren't separated, they, don't always agree on everything either, right? And so they can also work to remain neutral, create a consistent schedule, and number 3, use supportive language, right?
Yes.
Even if they're living under the same roof and they're committed to each other, sometimes co-parenting, I mean, let's face it, always co-parenting has its ups and downs and challenges, regardless of if you're separated or divorced or together. So I think this is really helpful for everyone, Carly. So let's talk about supportive language. That's your third tip, is to use supportive language for the other parent. I think this is helpful to remember, regardless, like I said, regardless of who you are, where you are, in separated or not. But tell me a little bit about the challenges and how you encourage this to parents who are co-parenting through a separation or a divorce.
Yep. So in the beginning, this is probably a really hard tip to do with parents who are learning how to co-parent together, using supportive language for the other parent. And that can look like anything from remaining neutral when you explain certain changes that have occurred if they have questions, and also using supportive language like within the home. So sometimes children get the sense that they can't talk about the other parent when in the other parent's home. So say, for instance, someone's at mom's house. The child may feel like in the beginning they can't talk about dad. And so the co-parent can say things like, "Oh, you're wearing your dad's favorite color." So that's some supportive language that you can do in the home to help ensure that the child that it's okay to love both parents.
Yeah, and I think too, hearkening back to the first part of this 2-part episode series about about explaining divorce to kids, being consistent, right, about the story can also be really helpful, and when using supportive language. So if kids are, in going back to like as you had mentioned in that first podcast that it's important to explain divorce multiple times throughout the child's life, throughout, weeks, months, and this story changes, right? But through that all, keeping supportive language for the other parent, especially as you're co-parenting, and if there are questions that arise too in understanding the divorce narrative later on. So let's say we're down the road, we're trying to remain neutral. We have a schedule. We've worked certain things out. And a child says, "What really happened with you and mom?" How would you help the parent use supportive language in that instance?
That's a great question. So that also would be a conversation to have with the co-parent too. Like, hello, hi. Susie brought up this question of what really did happen. Here's how I responded in the moment. I felt like this was okay for me to share, but always having an ongoing conversation with the other parent too about that is really important.
Okay.
Because
and that's being
times,
supportive,
right,
to each other.
Totally. On behalf of the child too, because if there isn't that communication between co-parenting, there could be consequences of the child choosing a parent over another, because oftentimes divorce isn't neutral. There's something that occurred that caused separation. There was an event.
Or events.
Or events leading up to it.
Yeah.
And not everyone agreed to the divorce in that relationship. So that's why it's really important, because it is an opportunity, like when someone is older, like when a child is older, to be heard by the child. But it's also something to be mindful of, because you don't want to lose all of those tips of being neutral, being supportive, because you needed support for that loss. So it's really important for parents going through the loss to be mindful of what it is ongoing, and to be in communication with the other parent, and to also receive their own help for their ongoing loss. Because that is a very, common question for maybe certain teenagers that are in their divorce process themselves of, well, what really did happen? That's a great question.
Yeah, and I will say, just from my own experience, one thing that I think can be really powerful in thinking through answering this, but also being supportive, is you may not support their decision. You may not support you may not be the one that wanted the divorce or in that position. However, being supportive could look like owning, this is what I felt. I felt really sad because your dad or your mom or whomever, right, didn't want the same things as me. And I found out that some things were happening, and your dad said that he didn't want to live with me any longer. And that really hurt me, because I wanted to stay with your dad. But your dad still loves you, right? So not like slamming him, right? Or your dad has, had a different desire. And although I didn't agree with that, he's still your dad, and he always will be, right? Yeah. So being supportive doesn't mean that you always have to accept their decisions or how they are parenting or how they're reacting.
Yep.
But it's not making the child, I think this is really important. It's not making the child have to carry your pain
Yes.
deeply and be your support
Yes.
as the parent.
Yes.
So it's okay that they understand the story or parts of it from your side,
Yep.
but it's not about, but sometimes unintentionally we want to share the truth, and it's your truth,
Mhm.
and it's okay to share, but the way that you frame it, it doesn't have to be in roses, but it does need to be, this is what I felt. This is what happened from my perspective.
Yeah, that's a beautiful recommendation too, because you do show congruence that way as a parent by sharing your truth while also supporting the other parent's decision.
Yeah.
Or even though we don't agree,
because
we still
ultimately
work together.
Yes, because ultimately, there are always going to be biological families.
Yes. Or even though I was sad,
Mhm.
we are still working together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's great. We're going to take a sponsor break and then come back. So today's podcast is sponsored by the 5-Day Parenting Challenge. It's a free 5-day challenge to help you make meaningful connections with your kiddos in 5 minutes or less for 5 whole days, especially when you're going through issues like divorce or challenging times in parenting. It can be helpful to make meaningful connections with your child that can last a lifetime. Just go to kidmatterscounseling.com/challenge to sign up for this free 5-day parenting challenge. And thank you for checking that out. Okay, we're back. So, Carly, we just talked about a huge topic. We talked about co-parenting through divorce. And although there are many facets, you chose to focus on 3 to help us. To remain neutral, you shared, is really important. To create a consistent schedule, especially for your kiddos, is really important. And to use supportive language for the other parent. Those are your top 3 tips, if you will, on co-parenting successfully through divorce. I know there's a lot more, but if there's anything that you would want to leave us with, what would you say would be important to remember for people that are beginning their co-parenting journey or in the middle of it, or may no longer be co-parenting because of a loss or a death of some sort from the other spouse?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I think to keep in mind, like during the co-parenting process or parenting process, like through divorce, that divorce and separation doesn't have to be damaging. And it can really, really stem from how the parents work together. And there can be a lot of healing done through that consistency, being neutral, and using supportive language for the other parent. As hard as it is, it's still the best route for success for your child.
Yeah. Oh, that's hard. It's hard. I think parenting is hard no matter how you slice it, right? It's how do we help to grow and to nurture these small little beings to help them on their journey as they understand relationships and how it doesn't always work out the way that we thought or the way that we planned.
Right.
And our feelings sometimes are so big we don't know what to do with them, but learning to be supportive in relationships.
Yes. And 2, like in that process, it's okay to make mistakes because you're going to make mistakes, and being gentle to yourself as a parent, that this is an ongoing process. And so in the beginnings of divorce, like within the first couple years, is going to look a lot different than 10 years divorced.
Yeah. And it's okay to say, I have new information, so
Yep.
this is what we're adding, or this is what's going to happen,
Yes.
or to say, oh man, I wish I would have said this.
Yes, absolutely. It's okay to have the story change because it's going to change as the loss changes.
Yeah. Well, Carly, again, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And if people want to get in touch with you just to kind of pick your brain or to ask a question or two, or to read your blogs and different things that you've published on this, can you tell us where they can find more about you?
Absolutely. So you can go to kidmatterscounseling.com in the blog session and specifically look through the search engine on divorce and separation, as blogs will come up. And you can also reach out to me at carly@kidmatterscounseling.com.
Awesome. Great. So if anybody wants to reach out to Carly, please feel free. She has a large, I don't know what she has.
A large plethora of knowledge.
That's right. Okay.
Collection.
Let me say it again.
My feet are asleep.
Okay. Thank you again so much, Carly, for joining us on the podcast. Carly has a ton of experience helping families specifically through separation and divorce and navigating those challenges and changes. So do reach out to her if you have any need for continued support or you want to read her blogs. I find them really, really helpful.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. All right, folks, thanks for listening. If you found the conversation useful, subscribe to the podcast and please join me again next time for the Parent Matters podcast. And remember, don't parent alone.